Uh, we're going to be continuing our so-called historical tour. And Dildrum, hello, it's good to see you. I know, I came in at, what, 2 hours, 52 minutes? Which is, actually, I'm pretty happy with that time. There is a fully an hour I could save if I just beat the bosses better. But I got Umud. I got Umud Walled for about 45 minutes. So that's okay. Anyway. The plan for today, last week we got last stream, we got all of the movement abilities we're gonna need, mostly. We're missing Monarch's Wings, we're missing Shade Cloak, and so those are gonna slow us down a little bit, but we should be able to do most of the early game areas. So we're going to be, hunting around, going through area by area, talking about some of the history that we're seeing in each spot, looking at the concept of lore, and generally hanging out, having a good time. So it's going to be a little bit more tour-like, go a little bit more in detail with all of the different stuff, see what we uncover, do a little bit of digging into the world of Hollow Nest. Now, to be clear, I don't know as much as people like Mossbag or stuff, and we're not using Mossbag videos to help explain the lore here. That's not really the point, right? The point is to apply the tools to the body of evidence we've got, which is the game itself. So not necessarily using other people's interpretations, other people's work, though that's obviously an important part of being a historian, or being a lore historian and working in games, is knowing what other people have done. But we're doing it as like primary evidence, figure out what we're doing as we're touring around. While we're doing that, we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff, hanging out, having a good time, so if you enjoy this, make sure you hit that follow button, because, obviously, that would, not this stream, because we're not going to get down to freaking the White Queen. There will be plenty of speculation about whether Hornet is void or not when we get to the White Queen in, like, 6 streams. But, you know, that's not today. But yeah, if you do enjoy this sort of thing, make sure you hit that follow button if you haven't yet. And if you're just tuning in, make sure you say hello, because it's more fun when we're all hanging out and talking. And if you really want to help support this channel, consider subscribing, using your subs, gifted subs, bits, and Prime Gaming subs, because those all go right back into the channel to help keep the lights on, keep making more ambitious projects, keep getting more historical games to play. We do exclusively, or almost exclusively, history-adjacent stuff, so if that is up your alley, we're going to have a lovely chill time, and you'll enjoy lots of other streams. Alright, without further ado, let's hop back into our historical tour of Hollow Knight then. We were on this file. Alright, so, where did we get to last time? Actually, let's check our thing setup. We've got lots of things here. Shaman Stone. That seems helpful. The Wayward Compass. Whispers its location to the bearer whenever the map is open. Yikes. Used by shamans to draw more soul from the world around them. Said to contain the knowledge of past generations of shaman. Reflecting the desires of the soul sanctum for mastery over soul, it improves the bearer's ability to cast spells. So, I mean, there's... These are super fun, cause being little charms, they're effectively... Right, our best real-world amulet would be, or comparison would be something like pendants or pilgrim's badges. Things that are supposed to embody the space, some sort of supernatural or preternatural attribute, and serve sort of an individuated locus for that veneration. And that's fun, because that means in a virtual world, right, they give us little bits of information, like the Soul Sanctum being obsessed with having mastery over soul, which appears to be the extractive force of life? Question mark? Strange. Important, but strange. Two things about the shamans, and then some other, like, vague heroism stuff. So, and KJ, thank you for the 9 months in a row, 18 months total at Tier 1, and Wolfie for 16 months of Tier 1. Super duper appreciated, both of you, and welcome. We're a bug. Oh, what a turn. Our shopkeep's come home. Just wandered back in. I don't for grand tales of his time below, but he seems to remember almost nothing. Maybe it was all too much for him? If you're interested in his wares, watch out. He drives a hard bargain, that one. No competition. That's the problem. It's bad for the market. Not that he's complaining. Based anti-monopoly elderbug? Maybe life is an emergent property of soul? Maybe. I'd say probably not, because, well, I'd say generally maybe not, because, you know, infection is something different. But at the same time, even from infected things to extract soul. So it's not clear. I don't know. That sounds like a lot to deal with, so instead, why don't we run away back to the beginning of the game? After all, we've got tours to do. And what could be better than starting our tour with someplace definitely familiar and not at all unfamiliar? There's not a lot in the King's Pass itself to talk about, because we already talked about all of these, and the, you know, weird terrifying statue in the background there. And these little statues that I'm busting up. Those are weird, because those are clearly constructed. And they're constructed in the guise of people. And they're just in the form of people looking at whatever this conglomeration is. So that's spooky. Ow. I suppose I should look at where I'm going, huh? Where I am going is here, by the way. Because it turns out, you know, the King's Pass, despite being the entrance to Hollow Nest, is kind of only the beginning of the edge of the world. Also, hang on, this is weird. This is probably a case where the easiest explanation is probably the correct one, of that they need something. But, this is supposedly outside of the kingdom, right? The Howling Cliffs are not part of Hollow Nest. They lead out into the desolate beyonds. But, there are still statues in the style of the bugs of Hollow Nest. Also, you know, these. So this is an area that's like a hinterland, basically, where it's almost... It's like almost part of the kingdom. But not really part of the kingdom. Hello, Peter. What did you miss last time? Mostly us just getting new movement abilities and laying the groundwork for a historical tour. Because it turns out there's a lot of groundwork that needs to happen, like getting all of our movement abilities. And a nail upgrade, and some other stuff. Well, hello, a deceased bug. They're wearing masks, so it's possible the statues are a continuation of a pre-worm society? Yes, but I find that actually to be relatively unlikely. Well, Matt, yes, I thought I could sense the aura of a fierce warrior approaching. I'm impressed you found my sanctuary here at the top of the world. No doubt you've endured many trials and overcome many foes in your quest to find me. No, don't speak a word. I, Nail Master Motto, who was taught by the art of the nail by the great nail sage himself, hereby accept you as my pupil. Let's begin the lesson immediately. Okay. Hold X to concentrate energy into the nail, release the button while holding up or down to perform Cyclone Slash. Your form! Exquisite! Now I know how my own master felt when he passed on his teachings to us. I hope you don't think me too forward when I say that I consider you to be my child. Yes! When I saw you perform my nail art, I felt a bond between us suddenly flash into existence. You honor me beyond words, my pupil. Thank you. Nods. Beautiful. My brother, Shale, how fare you in that green kingdom of thorns you call home? I think of you every time I raise my nail. Do you ever close your eyes and remember the time we spent together with Oro and our master? I like to think you do. The Great Nail Sage must be super big and imposing in order to teach someone like this. Exactly. Definitely. Yup. 100%. But, you know, your collection of mementos is kinda creepy, Mato. Not gonna lie. I like your cushions. I'm not sure I love the giant skull. Or the Grozmother. Or the whomsoever this was. This is a guy from the Coliseum, I think. I think so is this one. Like, that's just a lot. That's pretty intense. But hey, isolated hermit, oh, it's like hermit monk. Ow. Weird isolated hermit monk, thing. Right? Very common trope. It's a bit like having deer heads on your wall. I stand by what I said. Did I stutter? Just because it's a thing people do IRL doesn't mean it's not creepy. I am GORB. Bow, 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 bow to GORB. The Great Mind. I am GORB. Ascend! 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 Ascend with GORB. Best character right here. GORB? Dang it. Ow. If I die to GORB, I'm going to be very sad. GORB. I am GORB. The Great Mind. The pain. Ascend. Ascend. I am. Ask in the chat for GORB. Here lies GORB. The Great Mind. With literally no information about who GORB was beyond being a great mind. So there was a question asked last time on the Warrior Dreams, and why they might be buried in the location presumably where they died, rather than in, you know, a communal graveyard buried within... Ow. Seriously? Within the community of the bugs of Halonest. I love when my inputs get eaten. But, I think a relatively intuitive answer has to do with just like a broad distrust of warriors. Like, this doesn't really seem to be a society that is in love with warriors who actually, like, go off and do heroism. Like, I get the sense that, generally speaking, is not something that they want. Right? Because think about the most powerful people that we've already kind of seen mention of. Monomon, the teacher, Lurian the Watcher, and Hera the Beast. Monomon and Lurian are explicitly, like, not warrior figures, right? Like, their value, within the society is for things very far distinct from, their skill at doing violence. And they are awarded the highest-ish position, that they can, which is that of, you know, sacrificing their lives. Meanwhile, the folks in City of Tears, all the dead guards, seem to be effectively a monopoly on violence, right? That, in the ideal world, the Pale King seems to have a monopoly on violence. The warrior spirits appear to be people that, like, don't fit in that, and so are kind of, you have to respect them because they're heroes who accomplished things that ordinary bugdom cannot. They're not to be liked. Enjoying the bracing air, we're quite close to Halonest's borders and those desolate plains that surround it. In this direction, I'm about as far as I'm willing to go. Now it's been a pleasant change from the tight confines of the caverns. Found no small map for the area. It's a simple one, and more for completion, really. Not knowing the full extent of a region can be quite frustrating. I mean, more than just ancient Greek ideas of heroes, like an everyone idea of heroes. Heroes are to be respected, but not to be trusted. Like, very little good comes from heroes doing heroic things. It's overall just like a bad plan that you shouldn't really be liking. And I think that's what we see going on here, is that they get pushed, right? The heroic figures basically get respected, right? Venerated by having a grave marker, but not really kept in within any sort of other graveyard setting. And there is a graveyard in the resting grounds where other figures do lie, though that is itself complex because the resting grounds is not exactly, it's not like exactly what I would call a good place, or a central place. Is it because of their ability to do violence that might not be for the benefit of the leadership? Yep. Pretty much exactly. Right? Heroes are defined by their capacity to do frankly inordinate amounts of violence. And, turns out people with power like having monopolies on violence. That's how state authority is built. By just being the one who has the right to do violence. And heroes really challenge that paradigm. Which makes them unpleasant for, polite society. This is Oedipus, he was the worst, I was cursed by the gods. Why would you want to build a shrine? Because he was so good at being the worst. Exactly. Right? You remember Achilles, like you remember Cuchulainn, like you remember, honestly you could insert almost any hero from any folklore here. Because they were significantly good at being an awful person. That makes for a fantastic story, right? You love these stories because there's so much good drama that happens from them being just horrid. But you do have to kind of get around the fact that you don't want to live anywhere near a hero. Right? Heroes should be safely over there. Heroes should be safely somewhere else. They're useful. Sometimes, right, authority figures need to get along with heroes because they're useful. But you don't want one long-term sticking around because they tend to cause more problems than they solve. It's just when there's something outside the realm of normal social apparatuses showing up, you want a hero to come in and beat them up. For an Old Norse context, Grettir Ásmundarson is a fantastic example. Right, when an undead being shows up and is causing problems, you want Grettir to come in and go kill the undead thing. You don't want him to stick around for the next 3 months and just ruin your day. Wasteland. Bugs reduced. Okay, well, so that would be my take as to why warrior figures are relegated, firstly out into their sites of death, and secondly into the resting grounds. And perhaps I would contrast that with, think about, there isn't, like, a ton of evidence of mortuary culture among the Mantis village, but there is a little. When we go back there, we'll want to keep an eye out for signs of a mortuary culture, because that might be a really interesting counterpoint. Because, yeah, as a warrior society, there may be an interesting counterpoint to be had for the, treatment of great warriors in a way that's not the case for Hallownest Rith Arch. Anyway, this is a completely unsuspicious wall with nothing of note in it, right? Higher beings, these words are for you alone. These blasted plains stretch never-ending. There is no world beyond. Those foolish enough to traverse this void must pay the toll and relinquish the precious mind this kingdom grants. Can't lose your mind if you didn't have a mind to begin with. I love the inherent contradiction. Right? There is no world, there is nothing, but also, you definitely can just go. Like, it'll suck. You'll lose something that Hallownest has, at least according to, the Pale King, makes it unique. I'm sure this is fine. We haven't seen bright red anywhere in this color palette. I'm sure this is fine. Yep. 100%. Warmth, fire, light. Yep. KJ, I think that's your connection. I'm not seeing anything on my end that says that there is dropped frames or anything that might be causing lag. But if anyone else is having that problem, do let me know, and we'll see what we can do. So yeah, we had another one of those big monumental or epigraphic inscriptions that says, hey, there's something special about this space. Rude. Rude. Heck. Perfect. Full soul now. What? A whole chest with one geo. I'm sure nothing bad happens. Yep, nothing bad. Oh, Shaman Stone makes me 2 round. Okay. That's fine. Yes. Boulder, 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 boulder. Boulder. We got a new charm. And a big climb back up into sanity and good stuff. Whee. Beautiful. The Death of Boulder, Bug Edition. True. Man. It is... The combat in this game is just so fun. It's so satisfying when everything, like, gels just enough. Heck. Even when I am bad at it. You have a guide to Hollow Knight? Is it Don't Die? Kill things and don't die? Because that's a great guide. That's my usual guide to Hollow Knight. Nope. Oh boy. Even better. Oh, hit me. Right now, still catch a Shaman Stone, because, we are not at the let's accumulate all of the lore. We are solidly at the, right now, maximum DPS. We are, however, as soon as we get Sports Room, we're going to be swapping over to Sports Room because there's a stupid amount of lore attached to Sports Room for no reason. Bah. When I have something better, I'll put on Soul Catch. I'll remove Soul Catcher. Actually, I have Spell Twister, don't I? Do I need only one more Charm slot or... Oh, no, I'm just dumb. Yep, Steady Body's the best charm. Definitely won't screw you up. Well, Shader, just so you know, I have, like, 100% of this game. Not 112, but 100% of this game twice before. This is hardly a brand new playthrough. This is also a very casual one. Just have more charms. Yep. Shocking. Ow. I make no claims to being good at it, but I have 100% of this game. So it's not like I'm working completely in the dark here. Ow. Anyway, I think that wraps up our tour of Howling Cliffs, because there just isn't a whole lot of lore here. Right, the big historical tour information to get. Yep, just true. Just put on more charms. I'm sure it'll work. But right, the point is that we are wandering through. We are applying good historical methods to discovering the evidence of the world of Hollow Knight, exploring it, seeing what we can uncover, and having a good time while doing it. And having an extremely suspicious... Oh, did you call us? You called us and we came. We came. You don't look scared. Why did you call us? It doesn't matter, don't tell me. We came and I can smell something. Something deep below us. I want it. I want it. Shadow and Fire will dance together so prettily, I think. Oh boy, Grim Troop! Mm-hmm. Hello. You called us? Speak to Master. Okay. Drumroll, please. Hi, Grim. So, it was you that called us. Well met, my friend, well met. I am Grim, master of this troop. The lantern has been lit, and your summons heeded. A fine stage you choose, this kingdom fallowed by worm and root. Perfect earth upon which our ritual shall take place. And you, my friend, your own part is far from over. As the lantern flared, your role was cast, our compact written in scarlet fire. Eager we are to see you commence, but first some illumination is required. Across these lands my kid now spread, harvesting that essence peculiar to my breed, the flame in dream. Seek my kin, claim their flame, and return it to me. Together, marvels shall be achieved. But don't fret, small one, for this task you won't travel alone. My child shall guide you to the flame, and gather within itself that burning essence. Like you, the child plays key role in this task. Only with it by your side will the flame and my kin reveal themselves to you. Okay, goodbye. God. True. Oh, look there! Something strange and sinister has suddenly appeared. It fills me with dread. I think it best I try to ignore it. I know these grotesque strangers intrude on our peaceful little home. Sometimes it feels like the whole world is conspiring to make me uncomfortable. A new land. Different from the last. How many more will we see? The roads between are dark and long, but the Master's light will always guide us. Oh yeah. When flame burns bright inside one's mind, can heed the call across lands and time. Also, by the way, his accordion is a bug. Just for the record, even his accordion is a bug. God. Grim Troop is so funky. Because it is, like, substantively unlike every other part of this aesthetic. Like, broadly speaking, the dominant aesthetics of Hollow Knight are very much looking at, Victorian Gothic. So, right, we have the wrought iron lampposts, we've got the big Gothic arches, we've got kind of iron and blue greys, and fine filigree work, all wrapped up in this, like, semi-feudal theocratic space. Grim Troop is, like, completely aesthetically unlike it. Pulls, in my mind, much more from, like, very late I guess still Victorian, Victorian and later, renditions of vaudeville and, oh gosh. Crap, what is it? It's the Italian, Commedia dell'arte. That's what it is. And draws way more heavily from those aesthetics, to create a very different kind of darkness and horror, and that's pretty neat. Really does a lot to say, hey, the kingdom's statements, right? The big epigraphic inscription directly above the start of Grim Troop that says that there is nothing else, and that Hollow Nest is unique, and if you travel beyond, you're going to lose your mind. And Grim Troop says, okay, but what if no? Exactly. Venetian Carnival, fantastic shout. Commedia dell'arte, and vaudeville. To reach Dirtmouth, most travelers take circuitous routes around the cliffs beside us. It's a hard trek now, but in the kingdom's prime, things were far simpler. There's an old path in the cliffs that once allowed easy access. The bridge up to it has long since crumbled away, and even without it, a huge door bars entry. I can't complain, mind you. It has meant we've only ever had to accommodate a trickle of travelers, even during our busiest times. I wouldn't want hordes of bugs to descend on Dirtmouth. I like the quiet. I hope you aren't too disappointed by our little town, traveler, though it's now a solemn place. Once we were much more welcoming. Entry to the kingdom was forbidden long ago, supposedly after some great calamity. Many gates were closed, but our old well remains as a way to creep back in. Over the years, all kinds used the well to wriggle into the ruins. Wanderers, thieves, adventurers, plenty of you ever come back up. Perhaps they find what they're looking for? I'm not so naive. No doubt they've all been gobbled up. There are countless dangers in those depths. Did you know the caverns continue even below the capital? You have ventured that deep, so the details are scant. Those who made it back told of impossibly old structures and roads formed as though the rock itself possessed a will. Meh. Alright, we'll do this. Grim friend. Alright. So much for the Howling Cliffs, and so much for our introduction to Grim Troop, which is handy. Another wielding a weapon. I suppose you'll be leaving many a corpse in your wake. If you won't spare a thought for the dead, at least consider the extra work you force upon those in my profession.
Really?
Hello. Welcome, small intruder. I've been sound asleep in here for some time. Some time? Ah, yes. Well, now you're gonna woke me up. Some matter, I suppose. I might even be able to help you. I am Gigi, and if you found my way to my chamber, you must need my help. You see, sometimes we leave our regrets behind in the world, like black stains. If we don't deal with these regrets, hope starts to drain from us. Do you have regrets of your own, little one? Let me peer into you for a moment. Ah, you don't appear to have any lingering regrets. Unlucky for you. You don't need the services of one such as I. How long I must have slept. This land is so much darker now, so thick with the stains of regret. And the air is murkier. If I sleep again, will the darkness creep in here and swallow me whole? Exactly. Right? Baby Grim is best Grim, even though it talks a lot. Because it's cute. So, already, extra oomph. Right, so we have a gravedigger, which tells us that all this is a graveyard. And we're starting to get descriptions of the distinction between void, light, and essence, right? Between the different colors in the world. And so Gigi, right, some sort of therapist. I'm going to assert that Gigi is a therapist. Says, hey, oh, I already got this one. Boom. But, you know, Gigi, as a therapist, right, looks at our shade and says that that is the regrets that we left behind in the world. And so, void is either a manifestation of, or related to, or produced by regret and accumulated, like, unfulfilled wishes. That kind of matters. That kind of matters a lot. Because, you know, mental health and cultural histories and stuff like that. All of that is important. Grab song! So, now we are in this area, the Forgotten Crossroads. Crossroads is fun because, this is an area that very, very clearly used to be, like, very clearly used to be heavily industrialized. Like, as we look into, like, our Victorian Gothic ancient kingdoms, to which I would add things like, I don't know, the, you know, the Castlevania show as a great example of it. Right? What you actually, see pretty regularly in Victorian Gothic media is a lot of quote-unquote ancient tech being really prominent for dubious reasons. Right? It's part of the sort of modernization of the obsession with classical, the supposed greatness of classical society. And the idea of lost technological progress in the Middle Ages. The idea that you have really industrial feats of engineering drawn up in... Ow. Right? Drawn up into a largely dark sword and sorcery sort of world. And you see that really clearly here in the Crossroads. Like, this is an elevator wheel. Twisting paths, traveling masses, vessel sealed. Right? And this is clearly a giant lift with cargo. And even though I broke them, you know, carriages, wagons, with stuff. And a bit crooked, but still very present, what's its name? Heck. Street lamps. And all these signs of, like, cutting-edge technology wrapped up into space that largely, like, is not... no longer takes advantage to it, and, right, exists to communicate a big sense of decline. And that's going to persist kind of all the way through, right? There's the idea that there is ancient spaces. By the way, do I have D-Dark. I forgot that I had D-Dark instead of just D-Dive. So that opens up some options. In an insect society, the verticality makes perfect sense. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's, right, necessarily a statement of, oh yes, this is how it, ow. Why did I just stand there? I don't know that that's 100% a statement of, how the society is organized so much as a kind of necessary concession to being a two-dimensional Metroidvania. But I don't think it super matters either way, right? Whether you want to read it as, oh yes, the society just really loves verticality because that's how, like, ant nests work. Or if you want to say that that's primarily a consequence of the gameplay considerations, and it just happens to line up. I think you can read it either way, and it makes sense. Another weak one. I'd suggested try a snail within the Colosseum, though no doubt it'd be squashed in an instant. Gossip, 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 eh? Can I so want to do murder. Cower. Yes! Get splashed, idiots. Where is it? What is it? You want to hurt me? Ow. You're trying to hurt me. What are you talking about? I'll kill you! Your smell. Kill you. The light! The light! Alright, that's enough of that. Well, basically everything has dialogue. Hungry! Hungry! Light. Danger. Most things are motivated by being hungry, TBH. But hey, there's a Hellenist seal. Wow. Now it's at head height. Why can we read minds? Because we have this handy-dandy little thing called the Dream Nail, which lets us cut between the sort of borders of the mental and the physical. Ow. Ow. Literally is framed as the borders between dreams and wakefulness, but the border between mental and physical spaces. So, weirdly not given to us by a shaman, like you would perhaps expect. Right, ordinarily I'd be like, oh yes, crossing the border between a spiritual space and a physical one. Clearly that is the job of a shaman. But no, it was just a moth. Because they're attracted to light. Or something. Yeah, it's fancy. There's so much we can accomplish with it. It's also a necessary thing to, you know, beat the game. And it has a lot of lore attached to it. Crystal Peaks, City of Tears, and Green Path? Okay. Does the Libra have anything new for us? I mean, yes, but no. I'm sure Longnail is definitely not a scam. I'm sure Lifeblood Heart is definitely not even more of a scam. I just don't have the cash. I've got plenty of items that'll get me cash, but I have to talk to Lem, which means City of Tears. Which means not yet. But I love how all the towns are made out of egg. Or made out of shell. And, ribs. That's kind of... I mean, that's a little bit gross, right? Right, the fact that we're based, like... That the ruined houses have clear, ribs... top tier opportunistic bug society. Also, this one has its door closed, and that definitely means it's uninhabited, we promise. Yep, definitely. Oh hey, speaking of ancient technology. Man, look at how fancy this is. Right? I love this because it's such a clear articulation of the aesthetic styles of the Pale King and Hollow Nest at its prime. And god dang is it fancy. Based public transit enjoyer. Also, I wonder when this became a post-money society. Or... There's like this super weird thing, economic history moment. Geo is weird. Like, just on principle, Geo is super weird, because all the things one would expect Geo to, like, have and be and do, like, don't cost Geo. The tram is generally inaccessible because you need a tram pass. But, like the stag stations, you would normally expect that the stag stations, like, oh no. Ow. Rude. One perhaps expect that the stag stations would cost money, and they just don't. And not only do they just don't, it doesn't even really seem like they ever did. Meanwhile, it's not like money is unimportant, because the nobles of Hollow Nest still collect money. And people talk about how rich they are, But like, a lot of things related to transport just don't matter? Or don't cost money when they should? And that's neat. I shouldn't be fighting this with Grimchild, but we're gonna do it anyway. I'm sure nothing bad will happen. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Nothing bad is going to happen. Oh no, 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 no. Wake up, brother! Help me! Ah! Panic! Ah! Everyone panic. I'm sure nothing bad is going to happen. We'll have to kill them eventually. I'm sure nothing bad will happen. We don't know if there's a ticket collector. I guess they do cost a little bit of cash, right? The bell costs like 100 geo to unlock in the first place. Cause True Hunter. Hunters, Osman, you have to kill them for Hunter's Mark. So I guess, yeah, you do have to pay a little bit of geo to, like, unlock the stag stations, but once they're unlocked, it's like, whatever. Just pull. Ow. Yep. I'm sure this will be fine. Dang it. Yep. So that's failed champion. I just want to acknowledge that failed champion exists and there's a bunch of lore attached to failed champion. And okay. Moving on. I don't have the Green Path bench unlocked, so that's fine. We're gonna go to Green Path the old-fashioned way. Because I think we've said everything that there is to say in our historical tour of the Forgotten Crossroads, because they're frankly not really that interesting. Except for the temple and the way that this game constructs, like, a sense of ruin. There just isn't that much to talk about, because I know, right, you said you wanted to interpret these as potentially being a pre-Pale King society. Just due to the placement of them on exactly the same plane, and often in places related to things that we know are related to the Pale King, I don't find that super plausible. But it is hard to tell, and it's not like they're gonna literally make all the layers. And you do see some things, like these are just behind. They're just behind something way bigger and younger and pre. I mean, I think still no. I think broadly, there does seem to be some effort to eradicate all pre-worm things. There's a failure to do so, but it's not really through a lack of trying. Because, you know, the Pale King's a bad person. And I don't think it makes a ton of sense to be like, Oh yes, the Pale King is just super cool with this thing that the Pale King is fine with in no other situation. Right, like, is relegated to the edge of reality. The Radiance is sealed away. The Mantises he couldn't beat in a fight, so he made a deal with them. Deep Nest he literally locks away. You know, Monomon does a lot of propaganda work for him. Talking about, oh yes, all of these spaces that definitely exist, or Hollowness is totally unique, we promise, and there's nothing about any of the other spaces that exists, or is remotely relevant, so there's a lot. Alright, Ozymandias, see you later, good luck with class, and yeah, thanks for tuning in. Right, generally speaking, I find any interpretive argument in this game that hinges on the Pale King is not a jerk to be not a very strong argument. Because, man, he's just the worst. But that's, to some extent, spoilers. Anyway, let's go explore all the parts of Green Path that I didn't explore previously. Because there's plenty to talk about in Green Path, because Green Path doesn't... When I think about interpretations based on authority, or the lack thereof, Green Path definitely cares a lot about that. But I think this is also a good time to start having a bigger discussion. Because there is a bigger discussion to be had around the very concept of lore. Right, because the idea of doing a historical tour of a fictional space does kind of imply that there's a history to be had, like, that fictional history is a history that one can study, and that has some sense of meaning to it. And that is, you know, true, but at the same time, definitely is a little bit limited. Like, it makes some assumptions, and those assumptions may or may not be actually grounded in much of anything. So I think it's worth interrogating, especially since, you know, our expectation for what games do with lore has gone way the heck up. Like, way up. So, right there's this thing that a lot of games do these days, where like every detail in the world needs to be built out and uncoverable, and either the dev creates wikis or someone else in the fan community, right, creates big extravagant wikis talking about every little detail of every little thing in the world. And right, there was a big giant discussion in the Discord about this the other day. And on the one hand, right, it makes a fair amount of sense, that's something people would be into. Right? That's a fantastic community exercise. I don't blame people for being like, yeah, that's cool. At the same time, I think there is increasing frustration with that. I think that's a pretty justifiable bit of increasing frustration. Because, yes, it turns out that's a lot. It's pretty intense to be like, yeah, let's create so much detail in this world that there is a continuity and a canon that fleshes out every corner of it, and every story told in a space draws upon the same shared set of a completely internally consistent world with a fleshed out backstory from the beginning. Tiny squib, you approach fearless. Are you a hunter like me? Do you feel the urge inside to stalk, to kill, to understand? Then take it. My journal. It will aid you. First, the text may seem difficult to discern, but a learned hunter will come to understand its words. Venture the depths of this land and slay its beasts. Prove yourself worthy to bear the mark of hunter. Yoink. Taking the hunter's journal. We're not all Tolkien. Exactly. But like, think of Critical Role and Dark Souls and the Marvel Cinematic Universe and you know, basically all serialized media. Little squib, you may have overcome a few creatures, but you are only just beginning. Don't delay. Descend into the belly of this world and hunt down the life you find. And then sometimes lore gets too complex, and so in-universe time and causality can be twisted like a pretzel. Elder Scrolls, fantastic example of it. Yep. And it's like, you know, it's not like I don't sympathize with the desire to have infinite lore. But like, yeah, there is an open question to what extent that is something that, you know, super duper matters, and to what extent that is the most important thing to be doing. And I think there is a perfectly valid conclusion that says we are spending too much energy on the concept of lore. Oh, it's of course it's not, because right? I say the MCU as an example of a perception. And people have spent an inordinate amount of time and energy criticizing the MCU for its failure to be internally consistent, as if being internally consistent is the beginning, middle, and end of good criticism. Right, I use that as an example for a reason. And the reason is that there's a lot of critique around exactly that. But yeah, Warcraft lore. This is a story. This is a story about Dargans. Exactly. So right, there's a fan perception that worlds should be as rich and detailed as well, Crit Role, and should have a wiki with a lore keeper. And companies are hiring lore historians, right? This is a thing that companies do within their fiction spaces, of being like, ah yes, here is a lore historian whose job is to be the keeper of the in-universe documents and make sure it all stays consistent. Not archiving necessarily the actual development materials, by the way. In fact, largely not archiving the... Dang it. I was hoping you were going to dive me. Oh yeah. Ow. Rolled. Flame consumed. Right. On the one hand, the idea of the lore historian is just like the coolest job. On the other hand, that's where we're spending continuity coordinators. Yeah, right. As a great former name for it. Trapped. Yeah, because you're not cool. Cool. But, right, you take the in-universe documents and you're like, well, this is all constructed, and the fact that it's an external person who is, though I will say, right, KJ, a continuity coordinator is somewhat different. Right, for like super duper serialized stuff, yes, it's an overlapping job. But I'd also observe that for a lot of that is also, right, making sure things like, you know, props that are in one shot don't appear in the next shot. And that to me is something like fundamentally pretty different. From moss and leaf our life is drawn, and while it grows upon the path, we shall never wilt. Right? Like, if their job is to some extent make sure that shots within a single piece of media remain consistent, which is slightly different from making sure that, like, stories crossing many, many years in many, many things. You think Lore Masters for ongoing franchises' job is largely just to figure out a way to make the writer's ideas work in the setting as established? Are you sure? Right? Because I don't think that makes sense for something like, I don't know, a Critical Role. Whoops. Right? Which has, I mean, Danny, the lore historian, is great and does some fantastic work, but puts in a ton of effort. Not to say, oh yeah, right, this is the one and only, this is the established lore of Exandria, per se. And not to, like, step in the middle of play session and say, right, oh, you got a detail wrong. But rather to curate it for fans who really care about that, and to be able to explain things, so when stuff gets brought up, there's a resource on hand to explain what last time on, here's what this place was. Right? So, I think you captured one aspect of what it is, but not the completeness of the phenomenon. And in a phenomenon as complex as lore historian, like, that, I think, is a fairly big deal. Right? Getting all the variations of what that means is actually really important. I'm locked out over there. Okay. if I can make this safely. I'm sure I can. Ow. Well, this is going great so far. So, here's a fun question then that all this discussion of lore historians brings up. Is lore the right? Is that a contradiction of terms? Right? Is lore historian a fundamentally like non-existent thing? Damn it. There's definitely an argument that it's a non-existent thing. Really? Cause, right... Sure, I hear you, Peter, right? Like, I do hear you. It's just... You know, these days, to what extent does it make sense to say that those two are fundamentally different things? There's a thing there, so, ow. Nay, why did you not do... There we go. Also, this is a way to heal up, because these guys are free. Right, I don't know. Well, Critical Role is hardly the biggest media franchise on the planet. Not even close. It is a substantial one. Right? It's like mid-size. And so... to say that it has, like, no influence at all, especially in pop cultural spaces, I think, or rather in, I guess, traditionally fandom spaces rather than prestige TV, it opens up an interesting question, right, of the extent to which tabletop RPGs, and honestly, even not just actual plays, but even just Dungeons and Dragons itself, has an impact, and its 5 bajillion splat books on the lore. This is Forgotten Realms. If you are playing D&D, you're probably drawing on this world space. And it's wildly complicated everything. It opens up an interesting question as to does that have an unusual impact, or is the story largely from elsewhere in fantasy? Also, Munran 9464, hello. We have been talking about lore versus history while wandering through Greenpath, so thus far we have not gotten very far into the discussion because it's a lot of rambling. A visitor. Why have you crept in here, little grub? Perhaps, like me, you have a taste for discovering new things. I am Shao, and in a previous life I was a nail master. Yes, the only thing that drove me was becoming stronger and honing my skills with a nail. I imagined it was my one calling in life, but that feeling faded over time. Now I seek a new calling, something that speaks to my soul and compels me forward. That's why I spend my time here, secluded, trying to master the art of creation. Painting, sculpting, these things bring a different kind of pleasure. You don't seem very moved by what I've said. Was it Shao the nail master you were looking for? Did you come to learn a nail art? I'll teach you if you insist. Yep. 100% why we're here. Swoosh. Look at that. Shao, you're so cool. Master the Great Slash. So, my work, does it move you? The wielding of a nail, the wielding of a brush, these things are not so different. We cut into the world so that we can peer deeper inside. For now, though, I have nothing more to teach you. Your path forwards, only you can see it. Good luck. My brother, Oro, what drove you to hide away deep down at the very edge of that ash-swept grave? Was it pride? Fear? Or shame? Perhaps you should lay down your nail if it haunts you so. Find a new calling that eases your soul. That nail art you've learned, the Cyclone Slash, that was always Mata's favorite. Must have made him ecstatic to have a pupil like you. He always wanted to pass down what he'd learned to a new generation. He was not the most skilled pupil himself, but his enthusiasm and his kindness set him apart. I'm glad he achieved what he desired for so long, to be a teacher. I have spare brushes and plenty of paint. Once you tire of the nail, feel free to join me in my art. Woo! Alright. So. Wolfie, you ask a very good question. What is the definition of lore? Don't have a clear answer to that, but we're gonna think on it. And after the ad break, we're gonna come back and we're gonna hop in and answer that question, okay? Because we've been going for over an hour, and we do try and do ad breaks regularly, so I get a chance to stretch, get refills on drinks, all that stuff. If you are a subscriber to the channel, you theoretically get an ad-free viewing experience. Let me get somewhere with some music. So definitely, actually, let's get out of this room, because this room is full of wings. There we go. So, we're going to continue this conversation after that ad break. I'll leave you all with some tunes, and with our snails going on a quest. Very thematically appropriate for this game. And we'll be back in about 3 minutes, continuing our historical tour of Hollow Knight, alright? So don't go anywhere, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you all enjoyed that ad break. Hopefully Twitch cooperated and did not give you more minutes of ads than that. Welcome back. If you are just tuning in, welcome to Ludo History. I'm Adam, as always, and we're playing Hollow Knight, continuing on our historical tour of that game. So we've been touring through the areas, talking about some of the history, and are currently involved in a very complicated question, but a very important one, of what is lore? Anyway, I think that's a super fascinating question, right? One that I am a big fan of, and so we are gonna continue with that as we hop back into Hollow Knight. So, here's how I was, right before the break, we got asked the very important question of what is lore? Shockingly, that's something with no easy answer. Who could have predicted this? My answer to that question, I would say, is that it's the constructed past of a story's world. So it is notably not the same thing as, the plot. In fact, has very little to do with the state of the world as it is. but is the story of how everyone gets to where the story is. Right? So rather than kind of the world as it exists now, it is everything that brought the world to the current point for the story to happen. Now notice I say past instead of history. Right? I find that to be a very useful distinction. It's one born out of my background in memory studies. I find it to really be the case that the past and history, or the structured inquiry about the past, are not the same thing. I would say yes. Does that make original series episodes of Star Trek lore for what comes after? Obviously, in franchise media, this is a huge nuisance. Because dividing what is lore and what is story is complicated, and it is possible to set stories in the lore, right? Enterprise is based on what was lore in the original series. And yet, it's not like the things that were lore in the original series are still lore in Enterprise because it's set earlier. Right? That's just a hugely complicated thing. And, that's probably as it should be. It's almost certainly a good thing that this is complicated, because if it was easy, we'd have nothing to talk about. But yeah, because we are historians around here, and we love context maybe too much, I think, to a somewhat meaningful extent, a lot of this distinction, such as it is a product of the 1970s. Like, I almost certainly look at that and go, I blame the early 1970s. It's not like there isn't lore impulses earlier than that. There's plenty. But the big difference between earlier forms of, tell me about XYZ thing. Oh, I don't actually want to fight you. Oh, there's a lifeblood in there. Hello, lifeblood. Thank you. Right, a few things happen in the 1970s that affect this. Firstly, Star Trek starts getting a whole bunch of ancillary media. The second, the Silmarillion comes out. Third, I think that's probably a point where we get a critical mass of serialized comics. It's not like there aren't comics earlier. They are. They go back to at least... Right, the American superhero comic industry goes back to at least the 1930s. And they are serialized. I mean, heck. You can go even earlier with Pulp. Right, Pulp adventure stories all being set in like a vague shared universe. But there isn't the same expectation, right? There's, I guess, enough stuff comes out that's behind the scenes that enables, one, communities to start to find each other in a way that doesn't exist in, like, the 50s and 60s. And two, it kind of sets the expectation for things that are mass market successes to have, like, really, really really internally coherent backstories that it becomes rapidly across the 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? The standard that, oh, you need to build out everything, right? World building mania. Right? Build out everything, and then you can tell your story and it will feel real. The greater mind, when streamed of leaf and Cafley's cavern so, in every bush and every vine, the mind of Un reveals itself to us. Interesting. Pause on the discussion, because we gotta talk about this, because, well, we have a literate society that is explicitly not following the theocracy of the Pale King. As a matter of fact, we actually know that this is not technically part of the kingdom of Hallownest. This is Hallownest writ large, and it's connected and kind of semi-conquered by the Pale King, but it's officially not part of the path. So that's neat. So another great mind of Un. Goodbye. What about when there's contradictory histories in the lore, unreliable, or... They're both lore. Right? The lore is that there is someone who wrote a history. The question of whether that history is reliable, right? The contents of the surviving document is something that needs examination, right? But you can apply historical methods to. But the concept that there is a historians exist in this world. Like, that's not, of course that's lore. Oh hey, we've made a loop. Bench flanking, okay. And back down. Another secret. The green children walked from the dream unto these lands. Here we shall now wait, patient, for the call to return. Alright. Constructed pasts have a bad habit of being obscure as heck. Right. So, I don't know of very many story creators who are going to, like, super fight the idea that thinking out the logic of your world and figuring out right motivations for the things in the story to unfold in that way, in ways that make sense with the world as it is. I know of very few creators who will say that's a bad thing. But, right, there was a wonderful thread on Twitter that sparked this discussion, that argues, you know, as long as it's important for the creators to have a sense of the world, because it helps make the world feel lived in. And audiences will tell when, there are things awry. And so you need enough material there so that the audience will feel comfortable in the space, and that nothing is going to stand out to them as incoherent or like it just doesn't make sense. The thing they said, the kind of counterpoint, is that is not information that the player needs to be told, right? You do not need to know that so-and-so, blah 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 city, is the primary source in this world for XYZ mineral, and so and is therefore home to a big mining economy with a bunch of harebrained inventors who come in and spoil the fun, and caused a massive explosion that did XYZ thing. That's not, like, you don't need that sort of encyclopedia entry You don't need to create a wiki of this world. You don't need all of that detail to be uncovered or uncoverable. That is enough to have that idea so that you can create a story that is dramatic and that is grounded. And that is the box in which you must work. A whole bunch of lore cares about, right, when there is the idea of create the puzzle, right, where there's like a mini game within the game of there being a puzzle for people to find and uncover and argue about, you end up with things that are unbelievably cryptic. Like, that is about as cryptic as it gets. Who are the... This is not... Well, this is not outside the realm for what human, right, real-world epigraphic inscriptions could talk about. Right, short poetic fragments, verses that are so wrapped up in euphemism and sort of bindings for things that they become basically incomprehensible, or things that should have context, that we feel like should have context and just don't. All that exists. But within a constructed past, a past that only exists to the extent that the developers put it in, there's barely enough material here to even start to guess, and so the right Team Cherry, it feels like, has a game in here, a game within a game, that is, fans need to argue about what the heck all of these hidden, isolated, basically unfindable, forgotten scraps of information actually mean. Are all of these people the green children? Right? Like, is this guy one of the green children? Did we just murder people who are otherwise waiting to just go home? Who are waiting for the rapture? Oh, absolutely, KJ, right? As I said, I don't think you really find any argument against the idea that seat of your pants world building is bad, and audiences will notice when you're just kind of making stuff up on the fly. Right. Setting up problems and then resolving them because you don't have a good idea of what options exist in the world, and so what problems are plausible and what problems are not. Right. That tends to result in sudden subversion of problems, which is bad. Right? People don't like that. And understandably so. So, chat, where are your thoughts at with this? Right, the contention being that there is such a thing as, like, being too worried about, you know, creating the big encyclopedias of the world, and that world building exists mostly to create dramatic tension. Right? And to make a world feel grounded, and to, you know, only needs to be explained to the extent that it enables character drama. Right? Knowing everything about every city. In short, the idea that knowing everything about every place, or having the ultra-cryptic puzzles to uncover it all, is, you know, not an unmitigated good. it's not straightforwardly a good thing to have that. Because I'm generally on board, but it opens up, it's a bit of a bait question. You know it's a bait question. I'm not going to pretend it's not, but we'll see if you fall for the bait anyway. My, this place has much changed since I last saw it. The greenery grows so wild, the stations like to be consumed. If it's fun for the writer, then they should go for it, but I'm not sure it's worth the energy to investigate it if you're not having fun. A fair take, right? Especially for non-commercial endeavors, right? World built to the extent that it is fun, and put as much lore in the finished project as you need to justify that fun. Checks out to me. But she is calling. Home so close. So yes, these are the green children. That strongly suggests that the green children mentioned in the lore tablet are here. You know, just by the power of reading people's minds. Just read their minds for it. Ah, heck. Can't I kill that one? I feel like I can kill that one. I feel like that's unnecessarily violent, but yeah. Right. For commercial running, you don't need to if it's not relevant to the story. But that's coming for you as a consumer. He used to be really into dissecting lore, but now you're just exhausted. Exactly. I think that's at the core of the frustration people are starting to have with things that have all of the lore, right? Where everything is detailed in lore somewhere, and there's so much work to uncover it. Like, there are people who have built their entire careers off of being the person who understands lore. And that can be really cool when it's a big communal, right? When lore becomes a tool of community, and a tool of, you know, finding inspiration to tell new stories. But when everything has lore, every world is trying to be, well, Tolkien. When every world is trying to be Tolkien, right, it becomes just tiring. As much or not as you hate when important plot points or character moments are buried in ancillary media. Also true. Right? When franchisement equates to just telling less of the good story, or not finishing your story because it's in the lore, when it's being relegated to side documents, like that's just bad writing at that point. Those who stray from the White King's road shall face the law of Un. Sorry, I did buy a Subway sandwich in 2014 and got the free comic book that made it clear what was going on. True. Isn't there supposed to be a boss somewhere over here? I've missed an entire boss arena somewhere. Huh? How did I even manage that? It's not like it's a hard boss, it's just I'm confused as to how I missed the entire arena. There it is. Maybe? No. This is somewhere else. Still maybe. No, because that's just the Hornet skip. Huh? I'm so confused as to how I've missed the giant moss creep. Like, where did it go? Giant moss creep. Any giant moss creeps in chat? No? No? I mean, I skip this boss literally every time I play this game, so I'm not surprised I've completely forgotten where it is. But I have completely forgotten where it is. And that's just an odd experience to have. Because he's not there, because that's Hunter. Ow, sniped. Is it here? No. It's not there. Not over here. Exactly. Right. But yeah, even if we set aside ancillary media, right, I think there is often this question. Confusion or something else. Question, confusion, or something else about lore TM. Right? Like, increasingly there's starting to be distrust about it, of like, oh, you've overbuilt it to the detriment of the story you're telling. Which brings up an interesting question. I've got a super interesting question for you all. The bait here is, of course, if lore is a constructed past, what is the relationship to history games? Just like in general, what's the relationship between lore, games with lots of lore and historical games? Are those two the same thing? Are those two substantively different things? Are those something else? Aside from coding, well, right, that's its own question, right? Lots of games, in order to make their lore feel better, are going to use tropes, coding, and other stuff from history games. But no, I'm thinking, like, would you classify Civilization as a lore-heavy game? My child, can you still see? Please don't hurt me. Can't sleep with your eyes open, little one. Can't dream. You're still breathing, little one. Precious children, you speak such loathsome things as you sleep. Your claws scratch and scrape. Precious children, a monster has come for us in the dark. Will you sing for me? Ow. Ow. Welcome to the worst boss. Ow, jerk. I hate that I have to actually focus during this boss. Feels so bad. I nearly died there. Nearly just like fully died. Again, doing this with Grimchild is dumb, wasn't it? Civilization doesn't really have a narrative to be able to have lore. An interesting argument. Not one that I'm sure I agree with, but definitely an interesting one. Do games have to have narrative to have lore? But yeah, right, replace... If you don't like Civilization, right, Assassin's Creed, or Kingdom Come Deliverance, or pick your role-playing game here. Right, pick your options. Hello, Felix. We are debating lore versus history and whether historical games have lore. Exactly. Souls-likes have basically no narrative, but are maximally lore. Like, they have just the most lore. They are almost the definition of a pure, unadulterated lore. That's neat. Since we are not doing anything too fancy here. Does Persona have lore? Itself a good question. See, I hear you, Wolfie. I also just don't fully agree. Which is not to say I dislike Souls-likes. You know I like them. But I do find the sentence that they have lots and lots of narrative to be only half true. Right? It's more accurately that they simply like only have everything interesting in a Souls world happens pretty much before you get there. And so, right, the entire game is the process of uncovery. It's also why something like Hollow Knight here actually broadly works okay. Because the game within a game is really just most of the game. Ow. 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 Jesus, would you die already? Ah. I hate no eyes. Ow. Ow. Dang it. There are dream catchers in here because we're fighting a dream warrior. Right, one of the big themes, Lizard, of the game is dreams versus not that. And so the presence of dream catchers is basically always a marker of something that is pushing the borders between. But yeah, I mean, right, it is a good counterpoint, right? The idea that the side characters, right, are also really important in Soulsborne narratives. Yeah. No, they're using dream catchers because how else are you symbolizing dreams? Right? It is the easiest and most sensible visual shorthand you could possibly ask for. Ow. You're so mean. I hate... I hate no eyes so much. Ow. Seriously. There's no such thing as a fast way to beat no eyes. Or a fun way to beat no eyes either, I think. The one time you don't immediately teleport. I just missed it because I was busy having to focus. One by one, their eyes closed at last. I felt it, a warm stillness falling over us. I'm sorry I was trying to view. You were always protecting us, even when we couldn't see you. Take us there, please. A place where light cannot haunt us. A place without dreams. Please. Goodbye. A face carved from stone. What was the giant post? I didn't. No, I didn't even see it. The post there. But please go ahead. Oh. Right. So, no ice has been beaten. Moving on. let's get back on topic. So, I feel like engaging with lore is kind of like the history version of the idea behind catharsis, where engaging with the history of something that's disconnected from reality lowers the stakes, gives you an idea with how to engage with the real thing. I think that is definitely true. Right, I think that is, an extremely true thing that there is, here's the boss I was expecting. Oh, well. Hard boss fight. Hard boss fight. I mean, that is part of the argument of why I'm doing this, right? Part of the argument for why I'm doing this is the idea that we can engage with this in a way using historical methods as a sort of training wheel. That being said, right, it still asks the question, right, the consensus appears to be drifting towards saying, right, something like Kingdom Come Deliverance does not have deep lore. Right, I use Skyrim as an example, but right, people seem to equally resistant to the idea that Kingdom Come Deliverance has lots of lore. Which is an interesting observation. Right? That's just a really weird observation, correct? I think it rings true. But why is it true? Like, I don't think there's anything super duper substantive that separates them. Right? A game that is typically recognized as having a crap ton of lore. Elder Scrolls. Or, okay, let's be more specific. Skyrim. A game that people seem to be agreeing doesn't have lore. Kingdom Come Deliverance. So, what makes it different? Like, what is the thing that is different between those two sentences? Though once our land, a pale being lays claim to the caverns ahead. It may appear benevolent, but it does not share our dream. Be wary to wander that place. Oh. Right. Another interesting sentence right there. I think AC has lore, but Kingdom Come Deliverance does not. So that implies, right, all that is implying to me is that there is a really substantive distinction between lore and history. Is an encyclopedia entry in the game? Is an encyclopedia entry in the game not in from the game? Like, Is Pentament's little codex entries not information from the game? Right? If the game developers are doing interpretive work, of taking sources and putting together history and presenting that as fact, is that still not information from the game? Right? To use an example from Kingdom Come Deliverance, is the crappy Hussite sermon that you give not information from the game? Right? Where is that borderline? Right? Because you're asserting something very strongly, Liz, and something that I think is intuitively true, but also something that it is, like, really complex. Specific religious... History feels like it's more of a factual thing, whereas lore is a lot less clear how much is factual. Interesting. Alright. So, Sheep Serena, I am with you on that, but, find me a historian who says that history is factual in the year of our Lord 2023. If I go down there, I'm in danger. Ah, let's do it. Right? I mean, it's not really a criticism of you, right? Let me just be super clear. That's not a criticism of you in any way, shape, or form. It's merely the fun observation of that there is absolutely something that feels intuitively true on the sentence of, hey, history is simultaneously less clear-cut and more factual than lore is. Right? It's not a true sentence of what history is. Right? So there's like a false perception here that is influencing everyone. Right? Right? I think what they're really getting at is that there's a fundamentally, like, false and weird perception of history as being more debatable because it's not constructed, and more factual than lore. Despite the fact that that's not how history works. Yeah, right? What historian in the year of our Lord, 2023, is seriously making that argument? The answer is no one, right? No one is actually seriously making that argument. But yeah, Liz, let me push on that again. Right? If I am the lore historian for Activision Blizzard working on World of Warcraft, do I get to create the building blocks? I guess that is a real job. Right? Do I actually get to create the building blocks in any substantive sense? Any more so than I get to when I'm talking about, I don't know, 14th century political strife in Scandinavia? I don't think so. Because that's not my job. Right? Yeah, some human does, but some human wrote every bit of history. Like, so there is no such thing. Right? Okay, so I'm basing it off of what Sturla Thordarson wrote. Right, Liz. What specifically makes it not comparable? Right? Because saying it's not comparable is a sentence that is intuitively true, and one that I actually agree with, but that doesn't actually help us get anywhere. I know. This store turned out a delightful spa. Wonder so eased the tension in my shell. Right. So here's my thought. My thought is that it actually is that there is no like solid difference, and that is an interesting and exciting place to be. Right? That's not a bad place to be. That is an interesting and exciting place to be. Right? Historically speaking, what's the major difference between constructing lore for a game and people in the past making up genealogies to make sovereign divine descendants? See, you're on the same page. Right? So there's two ways to look at it, right? Either, within our definition of lore, the constructed past of a story world, there is something really, 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 like, ontologically important about the word constructed there, which I think is a totally defensible take. Right? If you want to be like, no, there's absolutely something like really interesting about and significant about the word constructed in that sentence. I'd be like, cool, great, let's rock and roll, that sounds awesome. If ow, that hurt. If you're in the category of no, I don't think the difference is there's a huge ontological difference in that construction. On the grounds that all history is constructed by people, because that's how everyone since, well, not everyone, but the general consensus is Alan Muslow and David Rosenstone has understood history. And I was like, okay, that's also interesting. Let's see. Every piece of history, things written or created for the purpose of telling a story about stuff humans has done was made by a human being. Yes, it can't be comparable to the concept of lore in a game, because history in general is generally agreed to be stuff humans wrote created about things that happened in the real world. That is... Again, I point to historical games, which often have intense fictionalized elements to them. Right? And if there is... Right? If it is the case that history, right, that the historical work is, and can only be, things written about things that they believed to be real, then historical fiction as a genre ceases to exist. But more importantly, that means you can't use a game with lore as a training kit for historians. Because if those two are so fundamentally different that they are uncomparable, then the process of, applying historical methods to lore just, shouldn't work. Right? That is... Liz. My point is that, when you're drawing... My point is when you're drawing a huge line between things that previously happened and the things that previously happened but in a fictional universe that we're just being introduced to, if you're drawing an impenetrable line between those two things, then stuff that works here should have a harder time working here. And the value you can get by doing things here should not apply here. And that those two things don't feel true to me. Right? Again, right? Memory studies perspective, right? If lore is a constructed past, what makes the constructed past different from the past that we construct to tell ourselves about our world? Right? In short, Liz, right, the line you have drawn just simply does not feel like an effective line to me. It doesn't feel like it answers the question. And I'm not articulating it perfectly, but it feels like an assertion of these things are different. End of sentence. Right? especially in a gamic... Oh, no, 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 no. Liz. Conspiracy theories are a third thing. Notice, right, what part of the... Right, you and I are working on extremely different conceptions of lore if that's a space you're... If that's where your mind is going. I think that's where our confusion is. Right? If you're like, conspiracy theories are lore, then we are operating on literally different universes. Ow. I was supposed to be able to pogo that. Boo. Not that that matters because I can't do anything with this anyway. If Assassin's Creed has lore, then conspiracy theories are lore. I don't think that's a true sentence either. Hello. You have walked in on Spice, yes. Dash Fox and Magistressa. We are debating. Here's... To reiterate the question. What makes lore and history different things? Right? Specifically, let's try and think about it in games. Right, if we try and think about it in games... Right, a game like Hollow Knight has a bunch of lore, which is a constructed past about the history of the world. Kingdom Deliverance has a rich constructed past of 1403 in Bohemia. Does Kingdom Deliverance have lore? Hey! Stop attacking me. What the heck? Rude. Blinding, rising, never be empty. Oh, radiant being, we are blessed. Your rays touch us. Your warmth fills us. Hollow Nest is born again, united in your blazing image. Well, that's maybe a cult. Unlucky. You can do history the process on a thing that is not history the corpus. Agreed. I mean, that is... That is a true thing. Okay, so you describe the lore of Elder Scrolls as the history of the world of Elder Scrolls. True. If you study for a living, you would not introduce yourself as a scholar of history, because people who study history in general are those who study the history of our world. So... Would you agree then, Liz, that saying that Warcraft's lore historian is a fundamental oxymoron of an title, but that is fundamentally a contradiction? Why not? Right? You are a person who keeps the canon of the history of another world. The thing that you describe as lore and not history. So if lore historian is the correct term for someone who studies lore, then lore is a subset of history, the corpus, correct? That's just that there's a colloquialism issue here, wherein there is typically assumed to be that history defaults to, or history unmodified, is the history of our world. The process that we do when we construct narrative out of deliberate pieces of lore evidence is the process of history. Concur, right? History as process exists in both things. But past as corpus and lore as corpus for some reason, right? So, what makes them not a So, right. So, if you're a person who studies fictional worlds using historical methods, you're like, I can't call myself a historian, I need to call myself a lore historian. Right, you see where I feel like I'm having trouble, right? Right. So Matrissa, an excellent point. I think the process of history and while the canon should be applied to literary texts are not going to work the same because our world is going to be more complicated than a single text can be. It is a true sentence, and yet one that I still seems like it asks to sidestep the question. Because let's reiterate a point from earlier. The purpose of lore is to... let me start over, I lost track of the thought. The purpose of lore is to make a world feel correct to someone inhabiting that world, right? To provide sufficient internal consistency that things don't feel awry for a player working in the space. Right? So, it's... though that only needs to be explained insofar as it is useful for, making sure the player is hearing, plausible stories. Ow. That was not what I wanted to do. Thank you. Right. Right, so... if the purpose of lore is to make a world feel more plausible, in a game setting, the reason you set it in a real time period and place is to do the work of making it feel plausible, making the story you're telling feel plausible. Well, they're serving the same design ends. Right? That within a game, they are serving the same ends. So, to that end, right, I'm going to use rag on Kingdom Come Deliverance some more. Kingdom Come Deliverance is not portraying 1403 Bohemia as it was. Right? So let me just be clear. Let's take academic history. This little box here, this little discourse that we normally operate in. Crumble that up, throw it away. That's not what I'm talking about. That's its own thing. That's and that does fun different things, right? I'm talking about, right, lore versus history, right, is only a meaningful debate or discussion in the context of media, right? So we're approaching this academically as media studies people who are familiar with historical methods. But to a substantive extent, right, we aren't fully caring about history. Like, I guess we do not fully care about history except insofar as it is useful. Heck. Right? Really not making any grand arguments about the academic study of history and how it's incomprehensible or indistinguishable from every fictional story world. Promise I'm not making that argument. What I am making an argument about is that we treat historical games with a different set of criteria than we treat games with lots of lore. And it is not actually intuitively clear to me what makes those two sentences different. Right? Why do we treat them with different... At the last jump, too. Why do we treat them with different criteria? Right? Where a game with lots of lore... and I mean lots of lore. Right? People mentioned earlier having a lot of fatigue towards it. Right? Getting worn out by... the expectation, the fan desire, and the feedback loop of everything having a 5,000 word essay, encyclopedic entry on its past, versus just, hey, the city's cool. Right? If a historical game has an encyclopedia, or to get themselves out now, right? If a historical game has an encyclopedia included, we're like, hell yeah, give me more. Oh, please don't leave me behind. You forgot about me. I knew you would. Everyone forgets about me. You're so... I'm sorry, I got lost. I don't know how I ended up here. You came here to rescue me, Brada? The girl that everyone just ignores? Sorry. When I look at your face, I can hardly... Just can't believe you came all the way down here to rescue me. Sorry, I think I better go back to the... I better get home. Shining future, too. Lizard, historical games. Historical games. You're telling me Kingdom Come Deliverance isn't chock full of tropes? I think it's nothing but tropes. Just happens to be set at Sasso Monastery. This gap between history and world building, if you're writing lore, probably looking more at the real world, who you want the characters to be and what you want them to be able to do. What fits the story you're working on? Yeah. You meant the differentiation are we making between writing a peer-reviewed study on the population of medieval France and I'm writing this fictional story in medieval France with varying degrees of truth is based in. Right. But yeah, right, like, of course, when we're doing peer-reviewed academic historical discourse, right, that's different. That has different restrictions, different rules, different other things. Right? Exactly. The point will be more, I'm setting this in medieval France versus, I based Game of Thrones on the War of the Roses. Right? I was going to avoid talking about Song of Ice and Fire just because I don't like it. But yeah, right, if you want to use that as the case study, 100% a reasonable choice to be using. Because, yeah, right, that's a world that broadly I think people agree has a lot of lore. And if that is a game with a lot of, you know, capital, or a world with a lot of capital L lore, then what makes definitely not the War of the Roses we swear different from, like, history? From, you know, the actual War of the Roses. Within the context of a story system. And by the way, Alapasa Bob, thank you for following. I hope you're enjoying the discussion. It is juicy and one without clear answers. Hello. If you have thoughts, 100% jump in, because this is spicy and complicated. But also, I think, a very interesting and worthwhile discussion to have. So yeah, right, we have this big discussion, this big question, right? We can use that as an example, right? I guess, yeah. Westeros as a world that is directly based, or that explicitly claims to be based on the Wars of the Roses and late medieval England, versus a story that is just set in late medieval England. Like, within the context of storytelling, what distinguishes those two? Not putting yourself up to a good start here, are you? Alright, well. Congratulations. That's not how we roll in this chat. Okay? Interesting. So, right? Again, Liz, though, as you make that comment, right, while it is certainly a true sentence and one that, you know, in some ways matters a lot, in some ways it's also something that, like, matters not at all, right? The question of, did they add things to it? Well, you know, that's going to be true of anyone telling a story in that world. That's not surprising. Right? Right, the question of did they do... I can heal one off that. Okay, it can eat my jump, that's fine. Right, we shouldn't... Like... People added, our fictional late medieval historical fiction text added things to the War of the Roses because how else do you get drama? You're not writing a biography, you're writing a story. Right? Right, you're writing a story. And so you're adding things regardless. So I don't think saying the difference is that they Westeros took away and added stuff with a conscious design in mind is going to be any more meaningful than saying Bernard Cromwell took away things and added things to the Heptarchy. Right? To use a very famous historical-ish fiction, Last Kingdom. Right? To say that they didn't, right, to say that, that 9th, 10th, early 11th century England is not having things added to it, just doesn't really ring true. Liz, that's not what I'm saying. Right? What I'm saying is that you are operating on the assumption of academic historical discourse, and while that's a super valuable perspective, right, it's also not quite, it's answering a different question than the one I'm asking. Right? That's all that's happening, is that you are answering very well a question that is slightly different from the one I'm asking, and there are some... I find that there's a lot of value in trying to pick, like, right into the heart of that, and see, because I'm having trouble locating a difference, right? Like, I'm having a lot of trouble when I actually dig down. There's an asterisk in there, Liz, right? When you are telling a story, is there an ontological difference between coming up with your own past or using a historical past? They have what seems to me very similar design goals. Right? The reason why you do it seems to be very, very similar. And so the question of what, if anything, makes those two fundamentally different within a story context versus potentially being, I guess, like almost a cheat code, right? Like history is like using a real historical setting as a way of automatically making your world feel real, because it technically sort of kind of is real, with all the caveats that all historical discourse doesn't actually quite work like that, right? It whoa. Whoa. Anyway, let's take a pause from that question so we can all sit on it, and talk more about history in this game. So, we just fought the Mantis Lords. Mantis Lords are super funky. The Mantis tribe. The tall is extremely, you know, they're all warriors. This is a martial society par excellence, and we love it. Within the universe of the game, they appear to be their big thing is that they were hired, mostly, to help the Pale King hold off the folks of Deep Nest. Right, we saw one mention of that earlier, but also have seen quite a few indications of that. I pogo high enough there. Ah, so close. That's fine, we'll go around the long way. But one question we wanted to ask earlier, right, is, like, is there any sign of a burial culture, and do they treat their heroes differently than the warrior graves in Hallownest? Because the warrior graves in Hallownest are not being treated super well. They're kind of wherever the person fell, and I think the reason because warriors are not generally trusted in the society. They're useful, they're important. They're sometimes but they're often completely insane, and not people that you actually want people to be emulating. You potentially see a difference in this society, because, you know, martial prowess good. Us being the teeny tiny agent of chaos, and violence, is good. We proved how good we are. The truth remains, our vigil holds, the beasts are kept at bay. Now, I don't actually think we see any graves, right? We do see a defacement, though. And what I mean there is just a place where, hey, someone has been excised from memory. There used to be 4 Mantis Lords. One tall chair has been wiped off the face of the planet. And not pleasantly either. Anyway, here's what they were defending against. This place gives me the creeps. Vicious little creatures burst out all over the place, and the passages are a dark, twisting maze. Unless you're well prepared, I'd urge you to leave. Though if you're feeling strong enough to descend, would you like to buy my map? Oh, thank you. You're going to... Aww. What a horrid warren of angry beasts. It's going to take a whole lot of effort to climb out the dark pits. I think I'll hide here a little longer. Oh no! Oh no, he's mapped 3 rooms of it. 4 rooms of it. He went down through the side entrance, mapped out 3 areas. I was like, nah, no thanks. Yeah, no, one of the things this game does phenomenally is it makes really smart decisions about how much information buying a map actually gives you. The answer is simply not very much. Like, it really does not give a whole lot of information about what is in it, so it's like buying a map doesn't shortcut exploration. It just makes it work. Right? It makes it a little bit easier for you, which is what it should do. If you want to invest in the tools to make it a little bit easier, you'll still have to look around, but at least you'll get some stuff. So, Mantis tribes are also, you know, clearly sentient, even though they don't talk to us. Because now that we've beaten the Mantis Lords and gotten their approval, they're friends. Now, if we whack them, they'll still attack us, but barring that, they're friends. They're friendly friends. Okay. So. Good bit of history work in there, right? Clearly, right, the idea of there being a truce to hold back the beasts of Deep Nest, you know, asks the question of truce with whom. Pretty easy to guess who the answer of that is, because it's the same person it always is. It's the Pale King, who is like the defining figure of this entire world. You know, Magistrissa. That reminds me, on the continued question of, you know, lore, and that whole thing, I wonder if part of the, right, Breath of the Wild gets praised for something that basically going back to something that games, heck, broadly has gone away from, which, exactly, Liz, got that ahead of me, Morrowind versus Skyrim, right? Morrowind's quest log tells you, like, how to get to places using the sorts of language that people use in the real world. Like that, and that's something that people who like that really like that. Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying it's implemented well, or that Morrowind's is necessarily done well, but it is representing a, I think, useful discourse for, I guess, as we think about lore. Right, the tension between how to say this, like, well, the idea that there is a tension, and that exploring that tension is useful, between just give us the information so we can go off and play the game, and the desire to uncover it yourself, and for it to feel organic. Right? This isn't a statement that one is better than the other, but, right, I think lore, to some extent, undergoes similar things, where there is a tension between the... Ow. The just give us the information, just tell us what happened, and the want to kind of wander around and uncover it slowly on your own. Right, I think that is a meaningful tension, firstly. And secondly, I think that that is a tension that is at least plot, like, to some extent useful to explore. Okay, Let me buy that. And let me buy that. And let me buy that. Fragile charms. I'll make more, and they'll give me more geo. Someone comes by, they have to give me their geo. If you have enough geo, you become a king. When I get enough geo, I'll become a king. Are you curious? You're wondering how I make my special gifts. Ah, don't try to steal my secrets. I'll steal them right back. If you're cruel to me, you'll be sorry. Don't like to be hurt, do you? Or maybe, hey, we don't king Shin. If you're nice to give me geo, if you aren't so nice, don't try and trick me. I'm not stupid. Beautiful, aren't they? These little gifts I have, they're shiny and dangerous and lovely. I made them, don't be jealous. Give me geo, you can have one. Enough jabbering, annoying. Step over here and show me your geo. Fine. Except I already gave you all my geo. Oh, that was a tangential point, Liz. Right, I was referring to player attitudes towards lore, not something intrinsic to lore itself. Right, that there is a tension between wanting this big interconnected universe where everything has like infinite story potential because everything is infinitely fleshed out. And a desire to just please tell me what I need to know so I can play the game. So I can actually appreciate the story. Uh-huh. You like how Breath of the Wild just melted a lot of Zeldas together. Yeah. The timeline is just a classic example of why the heck is lore? Why the heck is lore like that? Fossilize Goem, wedged into the rock. Like, that is the most classic example of lore being like that. For the Lady Grace mysteries, which are set in a specific historical place and time, but also have events that were invented by the author. But doesn't all historical fiction have that? And that's a somewhat generous. Right, Liz, I'm with you on that point. The part where it gets spooky is, in historical fiction, from the perspective of the storyteller's goals. What line exists, or, no, not what line, where does the line exist between the history and the lore, and what criteria, to us as someone playing that, what does awareness of that line make us do? How do we interact differently with each of those things? Does that explain what I'm trying to get at better? Right? I agree with you that there's a perception of a difference, but from a storyteller, like, where is that? Where is the line between those? And as someone consuming the media, how do we study it? How does awareness of the difference, or right, the line being drawn in different places, affect how we interact with the game's or other media's space? Right? I don't know if I have an answer either. I just haven't had an answer yet that feels satisfying, right? I haven't seen an answer yet that feels like it, like, feels true to me. Right, because intuitively there is a line. That's pretty uncontroversial. What? What? Like, actually change it. So, sure. Let me use an example ad absurdum lizard here. But one that is only absurd because Victor Hugo was just like that as a human being. In Les Mis, there is a stupidly long digression into wandering about Waterloo that has an awful lot to do with who Victor Hugo is as a person, and very little to do with any of the story of Les Mis. If that happened to be just a fictional battlefield, like, instead of Waterloo, and Victor Hugo's not super, like, dubiously real memories of walking around Waterloo in 1832. What? Versus, I don't know, Tolkien. Actually, that's a decent comparison point. Versus Tolkien spending an awful lot of time talking about how cool it is. He swears for the incredibly detailed backstory of everything in the appendices. Alright, this is a difficult question for me because you haven't spent any time interpreting the text of Les Mis. A fair point. It is 1,000 pages long for reasons. Exactly. Sure, yeah, the Scouring of the Shell using the Birmingham Mill. I feel like the line is pretty hard where the storyteller starts adding fiction on top of the foundation of that history. The part that seems blurry is like if you can use the same processes for both. The main difference seems to be like you understand that this isn't a factual thing that happened and can't be used outside the story it's in. I like that. I think that's getting closer. Right, the difference in use is, or the difference in The player response is feeling like, oh, I learned something that I will then take out into the world and apply, versus, well, that's closer. But the example I was brought up earlier is, at the point where you're using lore, the Dothraki, who happen to be coded very strongly, because that's one of the primary ways in which you generate lore, is by cribbing freely and painfully from real-world history. Like, players, at least some of the time, have to me what feels like a similar response of, oh, I have learned something that I can apply in the real world. Yeah. I mean, it's not sensible that people do that, and they're not exactly, like, well built as lore, but that doesn't stop anyone. That is, the question of whether it is plausible, I think has stopped exactly 0 people in the history of ever from taking lessons from it anyway. So, like, just the raw act of now, exactly, being trained to recognize elements in lore that are coded history, definitely valuable. Definitely has a lot of oomph to it, in terms of, by learning things that you can apply, and that's why, being past pros, right, being trained in real-world history and having the toolkit to apply elsewhere is helpful. Double Dangerous Friend is how it really was, but also with the easy dismissal of, well, there weren't dragons in history. True. Truly the worst take, on every front imaginable. And Mandrasa, another excellent point, because it does to me feel like a lot of the, meaning in historical settings, in historical media, is still meaning based on emotion. Right? You still learn things emotionally. Rather than, super duper heck. Well, at least I was fast enough, that's not a big deal. Nope, that wasn't it. One of these days I will make it through. Nailed it. Pliny the Elder would never lie to me. True. Pliny the Elder has never lied once in his life. Dang it. Ooh. Shiny. I mean, right. Part of the reason you've been struggling with it is you already do history of game lore all the time. And therefore don't, like, grok the question of why do we treat lore differently from how we, treat history? I mean, you'll observe that I am playing a game where we are doing a historical tour of applying historical methods to a fictional world space. Like, I am investigating this from a lens of, right, Liz. I want to make my positionality clear of that I am attempting, right, I'm having this conversation to investigate assumptions I realize I have been making. And assumptions that are not entirely... that are, like, not completely... oh, heck. Right, that are not... firstly, are not unique to me, but also, assumptions that lots of people in the scholarly community make that still merit like that don't necessarily straightforwardly or fully map onto popular perceptions, and the process of figuring that out is one that I think is potentially super insightful. I mean, we have made a good amount of progress. Right, like... we've gotten a pretty workable definition of lore, and we've gotten quite clearly consensus that there is a perception, and I think a true one, that there is a substantive difference between history and lore, or I guess between the real past and the constructed past. And where that gets exciting to me is just that it's unlocking a whole bunch of new questions. Right? Like, there's a pretty good amount of new questions that unlocks and deals with. That wasn't correct. Heck. You'd also like to ask whether there's a difference between lore and canon, because you think yes, but you don't know what it is? I think lore is a subset of canon. Right? But, like, canon includes... canon includes, the plots of the stories. You would have said lore doesn't need to interact with canon at all. Well, that's interesting. Did I not say overlap? I read overlap. Fanfiction can be... okay. Now, that... a claim has been made. I may have said interact, but I definitely read overlap. So, I don't know. But, fanfiction... like... fanfiction... fanin... Ow. I shouldn't go up there till I have that. Yeah, I'm not... Wait. Alright, Liz, now we're zooming out to a cultural history of franchise engagement. Like, that is valuable, but that is a whole... that is like, there's an academic subfield dedicated to that. As fandom studies. I mean, I think that is an interesting conversation, but if you're discussing lore in games, we're not already doing fandom study? See, I would say no, but on the... ow. Because I'm doing... the toolkit I'm using and the questions I'm asking are more in line with... ow. With media studies frameworks than fandom studies frameworks, which are sociocultural versus primarily literary analysis. Right, an intersecting idea, and one that has applications across disciplines. But like... I would say I am not primarily... when I'm thinking about lore, I'm not primarily thinking about how fan culture intersects with it and what that like does to change the text. And so like fan alterations are definitely real and interesting and valuable, but like aren't to me quite the same thing. That was a whole kettle of worms. Ow. I mean, sure, it's a fun snarky side tangent, but also it's one that you open, so... Anyway. Right, lore... Basically, I think the lesson I've learned from this stream is that, terminology is a mess and we should abandon all language, because, I'm confused now. Does that sound fair? And... An interesting thing... Oh. I see. I didn't realize there was one of these guys here. I'll be honest. Fully did not realize that there was one. One of these guys here. Not history unless you're the one doing the construction. Not putting the bees together, you're not doing history, it's just a bunch of primary sources in your box? Okay, isn't that... I mean, that's super true of IRL history, right? It's funny, because, right, that is exactly one of the, like, debates in the 90s, about, like, what history is and what the role of the historian is, as constructionist versus, Chat, do you think Grubs would say kill? Are Grubs all secretly murderous maniacs? I think yes. I think that's a true sense. Oh, maybe not. Surely this grub. That was a bug enough. True. Fully not having a great time with that. Right? Like... genuinely very interesting that we wound up, right, with lore is to some extent defined by observation, and who is, and the person of who is constructing it and what evidence they believe in and don't believe in. Right? Like, you wound up at Alan Munslow, but for lore. You don't agree with that? Then, right, either there's a disconnect in what the definition of lore is. Alright, but Liz, I'm specifically referring to your comment of that, that's magisterial lore instead of, and not LTR lore. Right? If those can both be the same thing or can be things that meaningfully entangle in the same piece of media. Like, can you elaborate on that then? Because, like, that sounds suspiciously like, Laura's deconstructionist process. Speaking of fanfiction, okay, gotcha. So that was me misreading thing. That's my bad. Cute. A lovely young glass returned to us. I must admit, I placed thin odds on her survival. Things seems to think very highly of her rescuer, some sort of dashing warrior type. Barely stopped gushing since she got back. Or he must have passed down below while I was taking my nap. That's a shame, I'd have loved to meet so impressive a bug. Hi. I am the impressive bug. Send into that ruin. Why? Things were so much simpler up here. Faring well in your adventures below? Well, I had an adventure of my own while you were gone. And Dildrum, a thank you for the tier 1 gift sub to Kyra. Super appreciate. I don't usually visit the town's graveyard, but I thought I'd go and visit the grave of an old friend. As I was walking amongst the tombstones, I noticed a strange kind of chanting coming from somewhere nearby. Extremely sinister chanting. Looked around. To find the source, I see two bright, horrible, huge eyes staring at me from the door of a dark cave. I pretended I hadn't heard the voice or seen the eyes and scurried back to town. My friend will have to wait a little longer for her visit. The noisy old lift, where does it go? Up to the old mines they carved into the peak, I suppose. I've been up there. Is it true that crystals grow everywhere you step? A villager brought some of those crystals back to the village once. I don't quite understand the allure myself. You can't eat them, and they don't make for very good pillows. They hardly seem worth all the trouble to me. Incredible. Well, this was a stream and a half, huh? We got very far into the weeds, and I thank you all for bearing with me, with patience, as we did that, because, you know, it's a lot. And it is a topic that, as far as I am aware, there's been very little study on and very little agreement on what that actually means. I don't think we're anywhere near an answer, but I at least did get some of my thoughts lined up. So, kind of where I'm at, right, after all the discussion, is the idea that there is very clearly a perceived difference between history as a corpus, i.e., a real-world past, and lore as a constructed past. What is interesting about that to me is that says something about how we imagine history as a series of facts that are applicable in a variety of contexts, which is a very much not the way that we perceive history as, like, professional historians working in contemporary postmodern historical frameworks, right? That's not really how we imagine past history when we're studying it. Right? And at that point, things get super thorny, right? But this is, right, there is the necessary and deep entanglement between the idea of history as a body of things that happened, and history as in the creation of narrative and inquiry about those things. So, right, this is where I think constructed past versus IRL past probably makes more sense as a distinction, right? Lore as constructed past versus IRL past for history as corpus. So, if we make that distinction, right, that there is historical games use bits and pieces of the IRL past in a constructed, narrativized way for the goal of making their world feel plausible and lived in, but it's an act of recombination that has an awful lot in common with what fictional worlds are doing with their lore as selecting pieces to create for the purposes of creating internal consistency. Right? And that makes it, like, really hard, right, to separate, to me, history as process, or history as process applied to the IRL past, versus history as process applied to lore. But those two feel really closely linked to me. And yet I'm still... that leads me to have a lot of trouble with figuring out, like, what if any substantive difference exists between IRL past and lore in terms of their utility to a story world. Obviously, in terms of their existence, there's substantive differences. At Blizzard, you've had some really good ideas here that I think give us an angle for further inquiry. It's not the angle that, clicks with my brain and that rings true with my experiences, but it's one that I think is absolutely, valuable, and I super appreciate your contributions to it. Right? Right, because, separating it purely based on the basis of intentionality I don't think works, because IRL past is, in a story world, is intentionally selected for its plausibility and its construction of coherence. And it doesn't feel intuitively more true to just say it's a shortcut, because it's not just a shortcut. My gut says that there is something different going on, and I don't know what it is. Right. So, if you are watching this in the recording, either on Twitch or on YouTube, and have made it all the way through here, first, thank you for sticking with us as we went wildly into the weeds. But second, do make sure that you know, leave a comment if you're on YouTube, or if you're on Twitch, follow the links over into the Discord, and we can keep talking about this. Right? Because this is, I think, a really important thing. I think it's a thing that's not super intuitive, but one that affects a lot of things, that affects a lot of scholarship quietly in the background in ways that we don't thoroughly understood. So I think that's a really, like, fun for me, potentially sometimes difficult, but fun for me, and valuable conversation to be having. So if you want to do it, head over to the Discord here and feel free to bother any of us about it, because I'm sure we all have very many more feelings. Thank you also to everyone who followed, subscribed, gifted subs, all that stuff. It all goes right back into the channel, and the support is super appreciated. Liz, as we finish up here, access is a big part of my Explore lore and word that hasn't been listened to. I hear you. I just don't know that I agree. Like, the broad term of paratexts really bothers that. Like, if something's thrown out on... If you look it up on a fandom wiki, or in the game, or in fan communities of educational mothbag videos, or like I agree with you on the idea that lore has to be setting specific and therefore loses value outside of the context of that setting described broadly, but that's a strange definition of access, you know? But that's not the term of access I use. And so that's definitely, like, messing with some things here. The point I'm trying to make, Liz, is one of how far these lines get blurry. So I hear you that you have made the caveats. Not from a developer interviews exist. Right? There are things that are absolutely considered canon to the... that are considered lore in universes that are not found in the texts. You have to look to... right? Like, I don't find that distinction to be a super persuasive one. Right? Like, okay, or if you turn it the other way, okay, at some point, right, it goes back to Pliny the Elder. Like, I'm not finding that a super I see where you're trying to draw the distinction, and... right, it's a distinction that I think has some merit, it just doesn't explain everything to me. Right? Like... yeah, I don't know how to articulate this super well. But... the point is, right, there is super substantive overlap? Alright then, Liz, you need to You need to back off. Right? If that's where your thoughts are at, then I'm not going to continue the conversation. Alright? So, I super appreciate you sticking along. I appreciate you sticking with me. At this point, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this because you're finding something persuasive that I don't. And that's okay. We can productively disagree. But then there's no point in continuing the conversation. Okay? So, to everyone who stuck around and listened to this, as I said, sometimes it can get a little heated, a little bit heavy. I appreciate you sticking around. Because it is something that is super interesting and a conversation worth having, even if we don't get to agreed upon answers. If you want to continue it, head over to the Discord and consider supporting the channel for more stuff like this. Until next time I see you though, we'll probably be back this weekend continuing this tour on probably less spicy topics. Get back into the world of the game, keep talking about the fun stuff in the game, and practicing that good historical toolkit. So, if you like that, we'll probably be back this weekend for that. But until next time I see you, whenever that might be, I hope you all have a good rest of your evening, and good night.